My name is Sophia, and at 28 years old, I recently embarked on the incredible yet daunting journey of motherhood. The birth of my son filled me with indescribable joy, but those first few days at home were nothing short of overwhelming. The house, once a place of order, quickly descended into chaos. Laundry piled up, dishes cluttered the sink, and the once spotless living room was now strewn with baby items. As I navigated the fog of exhaustion, trying to care for my newborn, the physical toll of childbirth began to weigh heavily on me, much more than I had anticipated. One afternoon, as I was struggling to soothe my crying son, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened the door to find Linda, my mother-in-law, standing there, her eyes immediately sweeping over the cluttered room with a mixture of concern and thinly veiled disapproval. "I thought I'd come and see how you're managing, dear," she said, stepping over a stray baby toy as she entered. Trying to keep my voice steady, I replied, "Thanks, Linda. Things are a bit hectic, but we're managing." I hoped she wouldn't notice the strain in my voice. Linda moved towards the kitchen, where the mountain of unwashed dishes seemed to echo my current state of mind, overwhelmed and behind on everything. "It looks like you could use more than just a little help," she remarked, her tone sharp. "This place is a mess, Sophia. Is this really how you plan to raise my grandson?" Her words struck me like a blow, each one amplifying the weight of her judgment, which bore down on my already fragile spirit. "I'm doing the best I can," I said defensively, my grip tightening on my son as if to shield him from the harshness of her words. Linda sighed heavily, her expression unchanged. "Sophia, being a mother is about prioritizing. Right now, it seems like you're not prioritizing anything." I was on the verge of retorting when Tom, my husband, walked in. He immediately sensed the tension in the room and quickly attempted to defuse the situation. "Mom, Sophia is doing an amazing job. It's been tough with the baby not sleeping well," he said, trying to stand up for me. But Linda was relentless. She turned to Tom, her voice rising slightly. "You need to help her understand what's at stake, Tom. This isn't just about keeping the house clean. It's about responsibility. She's not living up to the family standards." Tom looked at me, then back at his mother, caught between his loyalty to me and his desire to appease her. "Mom, please, let's not do this now. Sophia is still recovering." But Linda cut him off. "That's exactly why you need to instill discipline now, Tom. If she learns it now, she'll manage better in the future. You can't be soft on her." Tom hesitated, and then, to my horror, he spoke words that felt completely alien. "Maybe you're right, Mom. Maybe Sophia does need to learn the hard way." "Exactly." Linda nodded in agreement, her eyes hardening as she pushed Tom towards me. "Show her that this behavior won't be tolerated." Before I could fully grasp what was happening, Tom's hand connected with my cheek, the sharp sound of the slap echoing through the room. The shock of the blow was nothing compared to the betrayal I felt as I held our son close, his cries mingling with the rapid beating of my heart. "Tom, what are you doing?" I managed to say through tears, the pain from the slap overshadowed by the emotional devastation. "This is for your own good, Sophia. You need to learn," Tom said, his voice hollow, avoiding my eyes as if he couldn't bear to face what he had just done. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the soft whimpers of my son. Tom glanced at me, his face a mix of frustration and embarrassment, while Linda remained firm, her expression unreadable but her stance unyielding. What should have been a supportive visit had spiraled into a harsh critique of my abilities as a mother and my worth as a person. As Linda prepared to leave, she whispered something to Tom at the door. I couldn't catch all of it, but the troubled look on his face told me it wasn't words of comfort or support. That night, as I rocked my son to sleep, the dread that had been festering inside me refused to go away. The home that was supposed to be our safe haven now felt like a prison, built by the very people who were meant to protect us. I knew then that I couldn't stay, not just for my own safety, but for the well-being of my little boy. The slap wasn't just a moment of anger. It was a turning point, a clear sign that things could only get worse if I remained. I couldn't bring myself to sleep next to Tom that night. Instead, I retreated to the nursery, a small room that had become a sanctuary in the midst of chaos. As I held my son close, the events of the day played over and over in my mind, each replay only deepening the pain and sense of betrayal. The next morning, after Tom left for work and Linda was back in her own home, I made a call that would set my escape into motion. Jessica, my closest friend, answered on the second ring. "Jess, it's me. I need that help you offered," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "Say no more, Sophia. I'll come by today with my truck. We can store your things at my place until you figure out where you want to go." Jessica responded without hesitation, her voice strong and reassuring. The plan was simple, but it carried enormous risk. I spent the day packing as much as I could, focusing on essentials for my son and me. We decided it was safest to leave before Tom came home from work. I knew that if I faced him, he might sway me with apologies. Or worse, Linda might once again manipulate the situation to her advantage. As I packed, every item, a piece of clothing, a baby toy, felt like it was steeped in memories and unfulfilled hopes. But the echo of Tom's slap and the coldness in Linda's eyes were constant reminders that staying was no longer an option. By late afternoon, most of our belongings were boxed up and hidden in the garage, ready to be loaded into Jessica's truck. She arrived just as the sun began to set, her presence a beacon of hope in what had been one of the darkest days of my life. "Ready?" she asked as she walked in, taking in the sight of my life reduced to a collection of boxes and bags. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, holding my son a little tighter, knowing that we were about to embark on a journey with no certain destination. We worked quickly, moving with the efficiency of a well-practiced team. The nursery was the last room I cleared, and I took a moment to say a silent goodbye to the life I had once dreamed of building with Tom. As we drove away, I watched our house fade into the distance, a chapter of my life closing with a mix of sorrow and hope. That night, at Jessica's place, as my son slept soundly, I found a sense of peace that had been missing for far too long. The contrast between the safety of Jessica's home and the oppressive atmosphere I had left behind was stark. It was in this newfound sanctuary that I began to plan my next steps, not just to escape, but to ensure that Tom and Linda couldn't twist the truth to suit their narrative or inflict the same pain on anyone else. I reached out to family and friends, under the pretense of catching up, subtly recording any mention of Linda's controlling behavior or Tom's unusual deference to her. Some were cautious, but many were unaware of the full extent of Linda's manipulation. Over the weeks, these conversations provided valuable pieces of evidence that I carefully compiled. Text messages, voicemails, and even a video that captured Linda coaching Tom on how to control me, using language that left no doubt this was about domination, not concern. With everything in place, I chose a family gathering for the confrontation, a neutral setting with enough family members present to witness the truth. Some had already expressed discomfort with Linda's overbearing presence in the family, and I hoped they would support me when the time came. On the day of the gathering, my nerves were stretched thin. I arrived with Jessica by my side, her support a lifeline, as I prepared to face the people who had turned my life upside down. The murmurs of greeting washed over me as I steeled myself for what was to come. The tension surrounding Tom and Linda's recent domestic issues had permeated the family, reaching even the most distant relatives. After the initial pleasantries, I stood up, feeling my hands tremble but determined to keep my voice steady. "I have something important to share with all of you today," I began, as every eye in the room turned to focus on me. "It's about Tom and his mother, Linda, and how their actions have affected not just me and my son, but the entire family." Tom, looking both shocked and frightened, attempted to interrupt. "Sophia, let's not do this here," he urged. But I continued, pulling out my phone. "This is not just a domestic issue," I asserted, connecting my phone to the Bluetooth speaker. The room fell into a tense silence as recordings began to play. Linda's harsh directives, Tom's reluctant agreements, and their discussions about how to correct my behavior. The reactions from the family ranged from shock to disgust. Tom's aunt, who had always been supportive of me, looked particularly betrayed. "Is this true, Linda? Were you forcing Tom to do these things?" she demanded. Linda's face was a mixture of fury and panic as she tried to deflect the accusations, claiming, "These are just taken out of context." But Tom's cousin, who had remained a quiet observer until now, stood up. "No, they aren't. We've seen signs of this for years. We just didn't want to believe it." The confrontation marked a turning point. One by one, relatives began to share their own observations and experiences, slowly revealing a portrait of a woman who had manipulated her family under the guise of concern and authority. Tom sat pale and silent, finally realizing the extent of the web his mother had spun around him. As the family meeting shifted into a heated debate about Linda's influence, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out, not just for me, but for everyone to see. After the storm of confrontation, the aftermath was a somber realization for all involved. Tom's family, long under Linda's sway, now saw her manipulations for what they truly were. The collective shock was palpable, and the discomfort undeniable, as they came to terms with how deeply Linda's influence had infiltrated their lives. For me, the decision to leave Tom was as painful as it was necessary. As the family gathering dispersed, the finality of my choice settled in. I gathered my son, who remained blissfully unaware of the turmoil around him, and with one last look at the family home, I stepped into the unknown. Tom watched us leave, a mixture of sorrow and resignation in his eyes. His voice, once so familiar, now felt distant as he whispered a feeble goodbye. Linda, on the other hand, faced a harsher reality. The family she had controlled so tightly now turned their backs on her, each member grappling with their own sense of betrayal and misplaced trust. The blame for tearing the family apart was placed squarely at her feet, and her attempts to regain control fell on deaf ears. The evidence and the collective testimonies at the gathering had been too damning. In the weeks that followed, Tom tried to reach out, his messages a mix of apologies, pleas for understanding, and promises of change. But the memory of his raised hand, the echo of his mother's voice and his actions, were barriers too great to overcome. The trust was shattered, and with it, the foundation of our marriage. I found refuge in a small apartment, far from the neighborhood I once called home, a place where no one knew my story. My friend Jessica remained my steadfast supporter, helping me navigate this new phase of life. My days were filled with the simple routines of caring for my son and rebuilding a world safe from the shadows of the past. The healing process was slow and often painful. There were days when the weight of everything that had happened felt overwhelming, but the freedom to make choices without fear of manipulation or abuse was a powerful motivator. I attended therapy, joined support groups for single mothers, and gradually, the fragments of my old self began to come together into someone stronger, more resilient. My son's laughter became my anchor, his milestones a series of guiding lights, pulling me forward. As he grew, so did my confidence in our future, a future I was now shaping on my own terms. Months turned into a year, and one evening, as I put my son to bed in our cozy living room, filled with drawings and toys, I reflected on the journey. The pain of the past was still a shadow, but it was now dwarfed by the light of new beginnings. The support of friends and the unconditional love of my son had woven a safety net strong enough to catch me on the days I faltered. Sitting down with a cup of tea, I finally felt ready to share my story. I started a blog, a space to speak about my experiences, to connect with others who might be facing their own battles against manipulation and abuse. Each post was a step further away from the victim I had been, and a step closer to the advocate I was becoming. As my story of resilience and courage concludes, I want to pose a thought-provoking question to all of you. Do you believe it's possible to fully break free from manipulative family dynamics, or do the shadows of such relationships linger in our lives forever? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.